Well, good afternoon, everyone. We'll start right now the webinar for today with our guest speaker, Professor Colin Donaldson. Well, first of all, I would like to give a warm welcome to all the participants that have decided to be together with us one Tuesday more in our second webinar for family businesses, funded by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. My name is Maria Rodriguez, and I'm currently working for the University of Valencia. It's a great pleasure for our institution being part of this program and this project together with the different partners that are spread out all around Europe. Well, firstly, I would like to thank you all participants for joining this webinar. In which Professor Colin Donaldson will be our guest speaker. I would like also to remind that every Tuesday at the same hour, we have this series for online, online webinars for family businesses. So in case you feel someone could be interested in these webinars, please don't hesitate to encourage them to register as family business, or as well, simple to send them the link in order to join us next Tuesdays. Perfect. So I'm honored to introduce today our guest speaker, Dr. Colin Donaldson, PhD in Business Management from the University of Valencia. He's currently lead professor in entrepreneurship at EDEM University Center in Valencia, Spain. In addition to a vast range of teaching experience, he has also spent many years consulting family businesses in relation to culture, strategy, internationalization, innovation, and management. He is very active in the startup scene and advises budding and more experienced entrepreneurs on how to develop from idea to sustainable growth. Without further ado, I will give the stage to Dr. Colin Donaldson. So, Dr. Donaldson, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. So, good afternoon, everyone. First off, I'd just like to say that it is an absolute pleasure to be here with you all. I know it's virtually, okay, but it's nice to get in contact with all of you and to contribute to this really great initiative, and hopefully I can over the course of the session I can share some valuable information from my own experience related to culture and values within the family business environment. Before we start, I would just like to say if you could have a pen and a piece of paper handy, that would be great, okay? Because we're going to do various different short tasks and activities throughout the session. So if you have something to write with, that would be great. To start with, I would just like to give you a very brief overview of where I am currently working. As Maria has mentioned, I'm a professor of entrepreneurship in EDEM Business School in Valencia. But I just wanted to give you a bit more detail on this, as I think that it's very relevant to the context for today's session. So the University Centre is actually a part of a much larger initiative, which was what we call the legacy of Juan Roch, which is the gentleman that you can see at the top of the screen with his wife. Okay, so this is his what we call his legacy, and it includes a whole host of different initiatives from educational, sporting, and cultural foundations, amongst many other things. And you might be asking the question why I am showing you this, and well, the answer is because Juan Roch is the owner of the largest supermarket chain in Spain, which is called Mercadona, that employs around 90,000 workers and makes up just short of 2% of the Spanish gross domestic product. And what this is a real example of an owner of a family business that has not only experienced high levels of growth, starting with only a handful of shops in the 1980s to currently having over 1,600 stores, but the probably the most interesting thing for us is that he has been able to do this whilst maintaining the core cultural values that the company and he has had personally from the very beginning. So the traditions and the model for making it work are more or less the same. They're built upon the same fundamental principles. And in fact, this way of doing things has been successfully diffused through all the other parts of the legacy that you can see in your screens. And it's really built upon a culture of responsibility, of leading by example, of hard work and effort and meeting compromises. So if we say we're going to do something, then we follow through with that promise. And all of these values and principles are englobed by a very strong family orientation. And what it represents is the importance of having an owner or a leader who not only believes in the culture that they are creating, but has the capacity to communicate it, to stick by it, even when times are tough, and probably most importantly, get everybody else to buy into the culture. And it works. Okay, it works, and there's evidence of it working. And I am currently living and indeed transmitting the very same culture of shared values where I'm at now. So more specifically, the university where I am working at is located within an entrepreneurial ecosystem known as the Marina de Empresas, which is the marina of businesses. And it combines the university, which is EDEM here, with an incubator and accelerator, Lanzadera. And then finally, there is an entrepreneurial financing company called Angels. And it's probably best described as a cross or a hybrid between a family office and an angel investor. And the value and the culture that we hold reflect those of the founder who we talked about before. And the mission is to really train and advise and finance the entrepreneurs of today and of the future, all built upon this commitment for a creation of wealth and employment and promoting entrepreneurship within a society to improve it. And each one of these subcomponents that you see that make up the ecosystem has its own sub mission. So we are all very clear on what we have to achieve and what we want to achieve. So for us in the university, it's about training managers and entrepreneurs through values in leadership, in an entrepreneurial and very innovative spirit, and a culture of hard work and effort. So that's very clear for us. And there's a lot of different buzzwords that we use to transfer that information. So we talk a lot about effort and intuition and adaptation, and all these serve in a big mixture serve to add to the culture that is created, and it's a real positive one of hard work and effort. I just wanted to ask a question. Okay, so please feel free to speak over the microphone and engage at any time throughout the webinar. Okay, so I want it to be as active as possible, and I want you to contribute as much as possible. So just I want to ask the question: what do you see in the image on your screens? Okay, someone, Ricardo said two bears. He can see two bears. Anything different? We've got a peacock, a panda bear. Okay, so there's a lot of different ideas coming through. And the important point that I'm trying to get across here is that in family business, everybody needs to be able to see the same image. There can't be a confusion, as when something is not clearly understood, that is really when our business and our family systems have a greater possibility of breaking down. And just checking through the chats to see if anybody's got it. Okay, so I can't see anybody that's got it so far. It's actually, if you look in the center, it's two people dancing. It's a man and a woman dancing together. Okay, so I use this as an example just to show you that there's many different contexts that we can operate in. Each person has their own individual perspectives, but as a family business, we need to really be seeing the same image if we want to work progressively forwards, everybody moving in the same direction with the same goals and values. So to to begin with, before we start into the main content, okay, so in part one, I just want you to reflect a little bit, because I think it's really important to reflect on what we know and where we can go in the future, especially when we're talking about personal values and the culture and the beliefs that we hold. So on your screen you will see a number of different questions. So have you ever thought about where you would like your company to be in the future? Do all family members share a common purpose? Are new generations seeing this common purpose as well? Do they see where we want to go in the future? Are they personally committed? And how important is culture in the day-to-day running of your business as well? And what I want you to do is just to take 2 minutes to reflect on each of these different questions, trying to come up with an answer. So I'm going to show the timer on the screen. Whenever the red zero shows up, we're going to continue on with the content, okay? But I want you now to really spend 2 minutes and engage with those different questions, seeing if you can honestly answer them. Okay, so let's just come back and we'll continue on with the content. So it's important in anything we do, especially when we're trying to learn and make decisions, be it in management or be it in life, to always take a moment to reflect on the the current circumstances. So where are we at the moment? And that's the reasons why we were looking at those questions. So each of these different questions are going to form a foundation or a structure for what is going to be covered today. And in a family company, it is really essential to manage not only this idea of the family business, but also the business family as well. And as you can see in the middle, the mission, the visions, and the values of these two spheres might not be the same. And the majority of times there will be a lot of discrepancies between the two, but they should be aligned. We should be trying our best to try and get them as aligned as possible, as they are key aspects for the company that in most cases are not explicitly or formally articulated within the organization. So that's important because we don't really see them. They're often things that can go overlooked, but they are pivotal, and we need to really pay attention to them and bring them to the surface. And the characteristics and values that define and differentiate a business family ultimately determines the success and the future of the business family, or the family business as well. Okay, so the answers to these questions that you've just thought about are going to help you to ensure or increase the possibilities of having success over the longer term and having that continuity that we so often desire. So today's module is really covering all of these different issues. The aim is to provide family businesses with some valuable tools and some practical tools that can help to create a fit between a number of different perceived dichotomies. Okay, so there's the dichotomy between innovation and tradition, or formalization and spontaneity. And we'll also look at the importance of past, present, and future values as well. And if you were to ask me to put a time frame in terms of how useful will this be in scope and range into the future, we're probably talking about within a period of approximately 20 to 25 years, just to give you an idea. So the stuff that we covered today, it'll probably last up until 20, 25 years. So just to get us into the context, I would like to consider a case study. So it's set in the Spanish context, and it was created through primary research based on interviews and analysis of actual firms. But you will see that the company is actually a pseudonym. Okay, so it's not the real name of the company because of various privacy issues. So it's not the actual one, but it is representative of a real case here in Spain. And it is an interesting case to consider, especially in terms of thinking about conflict and the culture of different family businesses. And in 1975, City Building which is the company, was created as a real estate division of a Spanish furniture company that itself was created in 1958. And initially, the furniture company and the real estate division management was shared, but in 1988, it was separated. Okay, so previously it had been shared, but then it was separated. And in the 1990s, we could say it really marked a time of change for the furniture company, in that it experienced considerable growth. And in response to this, in 1992, because it was growing so much, the family decided to create a board of directors. And the board was comprised of 5 siblings. These 5 siblings were considered to be those most business savvy, the most adept at business management. And also included in this board were 2 external advisors as well. And the reason for the incorporation of the 2 external advisors was to try and ensure a degree of objectivity in the decision making process, and also to complement the various areas that the siblings were perceived to be lacking in. And given the high degree of complexity in the family, in fact, there were 10 siblings within the family. They began working on their first family constitution. And the goal of this family constitution was to really to establish a series of rules, a series of values, a series of guidelines for the family to follow in order to deal with various situations that could potentially occur. And naturally, on some occasions, the individual desires of the different family members didn't quite align to each other, and they didn't quite align to the business logic either. So there wasn't a match. And what this protocol did was that it provided a framework to try to specify common values and principles of both areas, so both the business and both the family. And in many ways, it acted as a foundation for a strong corporate culture. And at that time, some differences did arise. And these differences were mainly due to the differences in management styles. So, for example, some of the siblings, they were in favor of professionalizing the entire business, whereas others said, no, 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 we don't want that. We want more freedom and less standardized procedures. So, in light of these two contrasting styles and disagreements, three of the siblings actually decided to step down from the family business. So they relieved their ownership. They said that, okay, our values aren't aligned with any of the two options that you're providing us. So we think that it's better that we just leave the business. And the rest of the siblings bought their shares. Okay, so they recognized that they weren't going to be effective within the business, so they just left. And in 1997, they completed this constitution, and they did it by a number of key activities, which is quite useful for us to know about. And the first one was that they created a family council, which also included the in-laws to some people's dismay, to try and solve possible conflicts and unify the common principles that they stand for. Secondly, they also implemented various development and training plans for all the family members in hope of trying to create this more professional environment. And then finally, what they did was they formed a junior committee, and this junior committee was formed of the third generation adult members, and they wanted to try and prepare them and better prepare them for their life whenever they took over the family company. And in 2002, as you can see in the middle of the presentation slide, the furniture company was led by a family member who managed the company through intuition and a low degree of professionalization. And this combination of factors was a possible cause of its subsequent bankruptcy. But by contrast, if you look at the other management style, the real estate leader was a real advocate of professionalization of both the governance and also the management of the company. And these two starkly contrasting styles of leadership inevitably caused conflicts between the family members. And these conflicts in reality could have been avoided if they shared common values. And as a result, these conflicts, two important changes were made. Firstly, a number of the siblings moved to the real estate company to establish a new board of directors together again with three external advisors. And secondly, a new constitution, a new family constitution was drawn up, and a succession plan within this constitution was put in place to try and resolve any conflicts and establish the shared values and principles. And if we move on to the bottom of the slide, you can see that between 2006 and 2008, four major events happened, both externally in the general environment and internally within the company itself. Firstly, the furniture business filed for bankruptcy. As we mentioned before, this was probably due to two causes. The first one was the low degree of professionalism from the manager, And the second one was also the arrival of fierce competition, which was led by none other than IKEA into the sector. A second occurrence in the external environment was a real estate boom in Spain, which obviously greatly helped the other company, which was City Building in the real estate sector. And it began to grow a good reputation. It developed a real strong reputation, and the company began to achieve a lot of success in this sector. A third internal occurrence was uh, the family decided to begin or design a succession process, which was to last from 5 to 6 years. And to do this, they sought the help of an external consultant. And what they wanted to do was try and prepare the candidate who was going to succeed the current owner and make that person ready to take over the reins of the company. And the last event that really shocked the family was another internal one. And what happened was there was the tragic passing away of the city building's president. And at that time, one of the president's daughters was considered as a potential successor. So she was going to take over because of her qualifications. However, the family members decided that she wasn't quite ready in terms of education and training. And in the end, it was actually an external advisor that took over the presidency. Okay, and today the successor that wasn't quite ready continues to assist the president to get herself ready to take over the role. But what we see within this company now, after all of this context and all of these ups and downs and many different challenges and obstacles, is the company works with a very explicit and well developed code of conduct, which includes excellence in everything they do, every area of work. It includes a mutual respect for one another. So it wasn't like before when there was conflicts between the different styles of management. There's now a mutual respect. They actively listen to their problems and trying to discuss it in a constructive way. And they also reflect on the decisions that we make or they make. They think about what the consequences would be, and they take decisions based on this reflection. And all of this, what this funnels into is really an assertiveness and a proactiveness within the company. But to get to this point in their journey, they had to go over a number of different hurdles, and they had a number of different setbacks as well. Okay, so it's a really vivid example of context, how context influences the way that your business is going to evolve. But to make sure that you evolve in the right direction, it's important that you have some formalization and some plans. Okay. So what I want you to do, I know that it was a lot of information. It was a story that I was trying to tell. Okay. I think it's a very interesting story, and it's a lot of different points. So from what you can remember, how can this case help you? What are the main things? What are the main points that you can take out of this case study? And then maybe you're doing them already, maybe you're not doing them. Okay, but how can you relate it to your own company? What do you think by me telling you this quite long and elaborate story, what do you think I'm trying to get you to take away from it? So as before, I want you to this time spend 5 minutes just thinking about the key learning points that I want you to take from it and try and connect it to your own businesses.
Pues María.
Right, some really interesting comments in the chat and the discussion. Okay, so some really important points and very relevant points uh, is have been contributed. Okay, so Lucas, you say you don't see how the whole story differs from a non-family board of directors. Well, there's a difference because we're the relationships, I would say. Does anybody from their experience want to tell or want to say if there's any what you perceive to be more complexities within a family business as opposed to a normal business?
May I add something, Colin?
Yes, of course, please contribute because it's all about discussion.
Yes. So if I understood correctly, your question is why family boards are more fired up than normal businesses where non-family members are present. Personally, I think it's the emotion, it's the baby. So you would have brought up a baby. So there is, apart from the business link, there is a strong emotional bond, which you tend to justify and protect till death do us part. Whereas a normal business, it's a business. It's just a business concern. So we make profits. We don't make profits. We reorganize, we don't reorganize. It's just business, purely business. Whereas the family, it becomes emotional. The danger is there. Sometimes the family members could be on a sinking ship and they don't realize because it's the babies, they're a sinking ship. So a mix of external advisors with the family, because they are not so emotional, could help.
Okay,
To be
I
lucky
com-
to have a good external advisor.
I think that's better than I could have put it myself. Okay, it's all this idea to do with emotions and this personal attachment to, you talked about the baby as a metaphor. Okay, the metaphor to show how strong the feelings can become. Whereas in a normal business, we might develop this attachment, but at the end of the day, for most people, I would say the majority of people in a non-family business would just see it as very transactional. They would see it as, okay, so if I lose this, it doesn't really matter as long as I can make a profit from it. But with a family business, it's that tradition, there's that emotional tie, and it's really personal. So one of my recommendations in terms of family businesses, especially in the current circumstances with the pandemic, etc., and the context that we're living in, would be this idea of a need for agility. And sometimes within a family business, this is impossible. Why is it, or not possible? It's extremely difficult. And the reason why it's difficult, because in family businesses, from my experience, is we tend to fall in love with the past. Okay, we become in love and enamored with the past, and we can't give that up because of the tradition, because it's so strongly associated with our families, and we don't want to give that up. So I think that's a strong and key difference between the idea that we're talking about here is in terms of the family, the predominantly family board, and the predominantly non-family board. Okay, but the answer that was given there could put it better than I could ever put it. But if you look on the screen, just to talk about the key points that I was trying to extract from it, I know that it was a really heavy case study. There was a lot of content to cover, but I wanted to tell you the story because I think it's very profound in terms of what we can learn from it. And although the business family logic may not be perfectly aligned with the family business logic, the way to achieve a strong corporate culture is by looking for the shared and common values in both of these areas. And if we can find that, that is great. Okay, it puts us in a very good position to move forward. And if we can build this link between them, then we can almost satisfy both needs. And when we talk about a family constitution, this is applicable to the family business in terms of helping to identify and reflect upon the common values, the common family values, whilst also trying to foster this idea of a cohesive unit across the whole organization. So not just within the family, but trying to reach out to the greater organization. And the key here is to try and focus on, again, these shared foundations rather than the differences between the two. Can we come up with solutions that meet both the needs and fit both individuals' perspectives? That's why I thought within the chat box it was quite interesting when people were talking about different agendas. So the different families will have different agendas. But my question became, how do you get these agendas to match to go to the common goal? Because sometimes one person's agendas might not be very conducive to getting that final goal, to get to that final destination. So that's why a dedicated body or institution can also help managing the conflict. And I know that some of you put up in the chat about the protocols and having maybe external people to come in and adjudicate or advise. And this is when we talk about that fresh perspective in terms of we can get into a silo within the family business. We think that we're doing everything correct. The family way is the correct way to do it, and this then puts us into a silo when we can't see the bigger picture. And that's why it's always good to get this alternative perspective. Again, the low degree of professionalization is a key here, because it led to the eventual failure of one of their companies. So it led to the failure of the furniture company because they didn't professionalize. And no matter what way we look at it now, there is a key need to professionalize and formalize aspects of our businesses. But that doesn't mean that we lose the familyness or the family approach, but it's out there. It's almost as if it's a fact. It's a necessity now that we need to have formal procedures. And finally, we talk again about the external advisors in the last point. And again, that can add to the professionalization process as well. So how do we build robust links between strong corporate culture and the shared common values? How do you do it? It's extremely difficult. Okay, so it's an extremely difficult challenge, but hopefully within this session or over this session we can see a few ideas. But to answer your question in general, you have to do a diagnosis. Okay, you have to look at what the family values are and what you want to achieve from the business. Okay, so you have to go to the core, get down to the core reasons, and then try and find the match between the two. And as we said, don't focus on the differences too much, but try and really promote those things that you can have in common. But it really is just about doing this in-depth analysis of who you are as a family and what you want to be and what you want your company to become as well. But hopefully over the session we can see some ideas.
Can I ask something
on how to do
quickly?
that? Yes, so of course.
Related to this, obviously. So I don't need an answer now, but my question is, the external advisor comes in when there is conflict, or the external advisor is constantly there for every board meeting, 12-month round?
So I'm going to play tennis here. I'm going to fire that one straight back at you. What, in your opinion, what do you think would be the better option? I have my
Well,
own
I have a
thought at the
mixed-
moment. What do you think?
I have a mixed opinion. I'll tell you why. Because if the external advisor can be brought in if there is conflict, but he's not seeing the full picture of the business. If he is not present 12-month round in the board meetings, he cannot see. We have faced this actually when an external advisor cannot know the history or the root of a recurring conflict, and he or she will pass a judgment on the moment, on the meeting. It's too much on the surface sometimes. So if they are not aware of the root issue, and if it's because there might be conflict A, for example, which is being discussed in September, which had roots in January, but the consultant brought in September would have no idea about what happened between January and September. This is my I have mixed feelings. So my first reaction would be bring in the advisor in if there is conflict. But then again, as we're saying, family businesses have deeper roots. The agendas are not just business agendas. Sometimes they are linked to an issue which happened 12, 15, 18 years ago. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be the case because you run a business professionally, but we are all humans, we're not machines. So the underlying emotional history is there.
Okay, I think from my perspective.
Sorry, Colin.
Sorry, in terms of you're looking at, for me, this comes down to two different approaches. You've got a reactive approach and you've got a proactive approach, and each one of these have different pros and cons. No, so if you're only having the advisor come in when times are bad, then this is very much reactive. And as you mentioned, they're not going to have the complete story. They're not going to have the feel of the company. They're not going to really truly understand the values of the company and how the company is run. Okay, so most of the time, the culture within a company happens in the corridors, happens on the shop floor, happens in the canteen. Okay, so that's when you really get an understanding of how a company works and what they truly believe in through seeing their practices, their informal practices that we can't really objectify. So by getting the advisor in or consultant in whenever something bad happens, that's very reactive. On the other hand, if you have them within the board in their advisory role throughout the course, then they get a better picture. They get a better understanding of how things are going, and they see things more clearly, in my perspective, in that regard, because they're still objective in terms of not being a family member. So they don't really have the same emotional tie as a family member. They may become tied to the business, but they don't have that deep-seated emotional tie that's almost natural. So I would say that it's better to have them there as long as possible, because if they just come in one moment, it's a snapshot. They're getting just a picture of what is happening. And if they're making an objective call just on a snapshot of events, then the call could be pretty bad, okay? And it could have real devastating effects without knowing the complete context, the history, and how the context has evolved over time. And that would be my own personal take on that issue. Moving on to this slide, an interesting way to look at the structure of family businesses and how they work is the metaphor of the different rooms in the house. Okay, so this was introduced by Barn and Leckenauer. You can see at the top, and they also are consultants and professors. And basically, what they proposed was in their framework was that the family system within a family business can be divided into a number of separate, however, very much interrelated rooms. And within each room, there's considered to be a set of well-defined and explicitly understood rules and procedures. And what they think is that a well-run family business funnels all its decisions into the most appropriate room to make that decision. And the value about building governance around such a framework is that it sets clear rules and clear boundaries of the different roles or the different hats that we have to wear within family business. And it also helps to articulate and clarify the decision-making processes as well. So in other words, everybody knows which rooms that they can either enter into, and they also understand how, in the general scheme of things, looking at the whole picture, how each of the different rooms work together. And what this does is it allows us to organize the different relationships between the various stakeholders, both within the family and across the general business. And you'll notice that the family room itself, it runs to the side of all the other rooms, because the other rooms don't report to the family. Instead, what the family room highlights is the importance of trying to maintain family influence and cohesiveness and unity. In this family room, it's where you can start to train and develop your future generations so that they can have the skills and the capabilities to lead the company and what you consider to be the right directions. And the rooms are thought to be managed or governed by two things. The first one is structures, and the second one are processes. And structures refer to the rooms you actually create and what decisions will be made in the rooms. whereas processes, they describe how the rooms can be integrated together. So for example, in processes, we would consider things such as communication. How do we effectively communicate across these different boxes? And your first step in this is to try and define what decisions will be made in each of the different rooms, and also establish some sort of forums as well. And forums, when I talk about forums, I mean that the basic decision-making bodies with sufficient knowledge and authority to make these decisions. So getting people together who know about the stuff and also have the authority to take decisions on all of the various issues that they're discussing. So in the owner room, let's start off by looking at the owner room. This involves the decisions that will shape the business for the future and also in future generations. And in reality, the absence of this owner room at the top in family business is surprisingly quite common, which is an extremely important weakness. When you are creating an owner room, the owners will keep a number of core and crucial decisions for themselves. And these decisions could include how ownership interests change. For example, how can ownership be bought? How can it be transferred to the next generations? And all these different things. So how can the owner of the company change? They also will consider final says on different actions that are extremely important and fundamental to what it means to be an owner within the company. So a decision such as we're moving from private to public through a public offering, this would be taken by the owners in the owner room. If you're going to acquire a large amount of debt to finance some venture or to finance some product development process, then this will be taken by the owners. If you're going to sell the company, it will be dealt with in the owner's room. And in this room is where you set the goals that define the success of your company. And this in this room is interesting because it will probably determine whether you're going to elect the family or non-family board members to represent your interests. So who do you think are going to represent your interest more effectively? And with this, it must be stated that as an owner, you need to decide what are the most important decisions for you, and then importantly, everything else must be delegated. Okay, decide what's important for you, and then have the courage and be brave enough to delegate the rest, because you know you're going to have the people, the correct people with the correct skills and capabilities in other areas. And the current owners are the core members of the owners room, and the future owners only enter the room. So if we're talking about succession and we're going to pass it on to the next generation, those future generations only enter this room when you think that they can positively contribute to the discussion, okay, and they're ready to do it. And the final thing I want to say in the owners room would be that another demographic that has a great influence on the owners are the spouses that are sometimes invited to participate as well. So try and get everybody that is related involved in this, okay? So in terms of influence, and the spouse has a great influence in the decisions that are made. And a well-run and organized owner's room will make, to the best possible extent, they will make sure that everybody has a say. All the owners in the room will have a say. Everyone might not have a vote on what happens, but you will certainly take them into consideration. Moving down is the boardroom, and the boardroom's main function is to provide the link between the owners and the management. And in this way, the board is really responsible for making sure that the managers are operating the company in a way that meets the owner's objectives. And if you want to find out what questions are to be asked in the boardroom, it's a simple one question you have to ask yourself, which is basically, is the decision that's significant. If a bad one is made, that it will put the company at significant risk. Okay, so if you're talking about a decision that if you get the answer wrong, your company would be in severe risk, then it goes into the boardroom. And some questions that might be categorized as this, well, the first one, the most fundamental one, what do you think it is? Okay, so I'm going to ask you, if you get this decision wrong, your company is going to be at a severe risk. What do you think the most important job for the boardroom is? Evaluate risk. Okay, so even defining the strategy. Not sure I understand. Okay, so basically, what is the most fundamental decision that the board will have to take? That if they don't do it correctly, then the business is going to be put at risk. And what I'm looking for here really is, before all of these things, they have to get the right person. Okay, so appointing management, appointing the CEO, they have to get the right person in the chief executive officer position. Okay, so that is probably the fundamental and most important decision that the board will make, because if they don't get it right and they hire the wrong person, then the company is at a severe risk. They will also deal with planning issues such as succession. They will think about compensation strategies and also strategies in terms of acquisitions or getting a loan or paying out dividends. So all of these things occur in the boardroom. But I want to just really emphasize that although the board has a lot of power, the board should oversee the business. The board should be overseeing the business, but not running it. Okay, so they should be looking over it, but they're not running it. And important for family businesses, there are a number of boards that you can choose from that range from the easy to implement and more flexible informal advisory board to more formal systems that have legal power to make decisions about the business. Now, you may be tempted to think that I'm going to restrict access to my board and keep it for family members only. And this will happen for, I've seen it, it will happen for several different reasons. Probably the most common one is that the privacy, they don't want to, or you don't want to let outsiders in because you have a lot of private things that you don't want people from the outside seeing. And I agree that this is a big step, but as we observed in the case study, it's important to listen to these other voices as well that can provide a different perspective. And having independent directors in your board means that you can change the dynamics of your board to make it more professional. You can start to better manage the careers of your other family members, building on their experience. Okay, so this complementary expertise that we talked about, they're plugging in the gaps, they're filling in the gaps that maybe you don't have knowledge on. And another significant point is the fact that when your business grows and becomes more complex, one of the most widely accepted universal best practices is to add independent directors or advisors. Okay, so as your business starts to grow, it's universal best practice to do so. But whatever in the end, whatever you decide to do or have done, just remember that the design of your board needs to understand the interests of the owners. Fundamental, needs to understand your interests, your vision, your values, and what you want to achieve. For instance, don't have someone in your board who is your best friend. You're having someone in your board just because they're your best friend, or don't have someone in your board that sells you services because they might have a conflict of interest or ulterior motives as well. So looking at the comment section again, most medium and small family businesses will be on board and hold the role of CEO and run the business. Yep. So that's a decision that has to be made. Okay, so a lot of managerial positions, as we'll talk about now, or board positions are filled by the family themselves. So if we move on to the management room, in which more or less all the remaining decisions that you can think of are withheld for management, but predominantly these are to do with operations and strategies. And as we said in the beginning, you might only have family members as managers, but as you start to grow little by little, if you want to add a little bit more professionalism, then we start to consider outsiders as well, those external to the family. But don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that you have to make an either or decision about being family run or being professional. With the correct policies, so if you implement the correct policies and protocols, you can achieve them both. So it's not to say you have to decide you can be professional or you can be family run. Okay, you find the mixture that suits your own individual circumstances. And just to talk about the family room last, to close this slide off, this room is designed to increase the cohesiveness and the harmony within the family. And at the same time, it is here where the talent of the younger generations can be nurtured and developed accordingly. Because of this, like we talked about before, but I think Kevin said it before, because of this, it is a highly emotional setting, but we try to keep to the best of our abilities. I know it's an extremely difficult task to do, but we try to keep these emotions out of the decision-making processes. It is in the family room where we develop the bonds, and we also develop strong relationships. How do we do it? We start to share experiences, and we also stay connected to the business. So both big and small companies, which may have half a dozen family members or hundreds of family members, need a strong family room. Whereas if you are a solo entrepreneur or a solo family business owner, if you are in a partnership with a family member, clearly you don't have as much need for a family room. Okay, but as soon as you start to get to half a dozen people, a dozen people, then you need to really start about developing this family room to build connections. And across all the different family businesses, the same challenges keep coming up over and over again within this room that need to be dealt with. And really, you can see them on the screen. We're looking at questions that what can bring us together as a family? How can we communicate both within and across the business? How can we develop the next generation? How can we organize so that we stay together? What policies should be put in place so that we can effectively manage conflict? And it's not on your screen, but don't forget about this. In the world of business management and business consulting, we tend to get focused on these mechanical aspects. We tend to focus on we need to tick this box, we need to do X, Y, and Z. But please, from a personal perspective, don't forget about trying to, within the family room, to try and generate this sense of enjoyment, this sense of having fun, build connections, deep connections with one another. But for enjoyment, you want to find a real purpose within your family business, that it's not just going to work, you're actually going there because you enjoy doing it. So that's another key task that you have to do, or you have to look towards within the family room. And most family rooms contain two common structures: the family council and a family assembly. A family council is uh, basically a small group of family members, normally between about 4 and 7 people. And how do they get to this position? Well, they are elected by the full family to try to find solutions towards and indeed prevent the challenges that we've just mentioned before. We're trying to prevent them from happening. And normally this council will have a few important jobs, and amongst them, educating and developing the next generation. Okay, we're trying to create the next generation. We're trying to progress them in terms of their knowledge and their ability to be shareholders, to be family members, to be good citizens, and also to be good professionals. Okay, so the Family Council has that role of really bringing up through the next generation. And it can manage communication as well. So whatever way you want to manage communication, it can be through messaging services or electronic platforms. So you're trying to really integrate the communication, forms of communication, and build a legacy as well. And you can build a legacy through a number of external events, guest speakers, and other activities. Okay, so you're trying to build it. In terms of when I was talking about communication, I know the businesses that I'm working with at the moment, in terms of the pandemic, we're seeing a lot of usage of the common messaging platforms, Slack, WhatsApp. There's been a lot. Surprisingly, there's been a lot more use. A lot of families that maybe weren't using it before have started to adapt and began to use various different means of communication. And this is extremely important to try and maintain that connection, especially when maybe the physical presence isn't permitted. So a lot of them have branched out into these different forms that traditionally maybe they weren't accustomed to doing. Um, Membership in this family council can also have the added benefit. So if you're a family member, but you're not active within the business, and you don't work within the business, but you are still a shareholder, this creates a great opportunity for you to feel connected. It creates a great opportunity for you to feel as if you're contributing to the legacy as well. Uh, the second box on your screens you can see is the family assembly, and the family assembly is basically just a reunion for a business family, and it's organized by the Family Council. The agenda will include things such as business issues. It will include family issues as well, but most importantly is that you need to integrate and build dedicate time to create this cohesiveness and connections amongst the family members and educate. So that might be going away on a retreat, a day experience, etc. There's a whole host of different ways that family businesses use within these assemblies. And at the locations to try and educate people. A creative approach that I have seen companies that have used has been that they have tried to create biographies of the different family members to try and educate the children. Another way is that they make many case studies so that the younger generations, they can start to work through these case studies and build up an understanding of the history of the company and what it stands for. And the bigger that your family business grows, the more important this assembly becomes. If you want to maintain the shared values that we talk about, then you need the assembly. Make sure we're all rowing in the same direction. So you talked about before, if you have an external advisor who doesn't really know the history or the circumstances, this could be a potential method to alert that person to what is going on and what the business is about. So the many case studies that you used, that companies use with their younger generations, you can provide them. You can create case studies of your business to show to your advisors as well. So in terms of this room metaphor, it is not just important that we talked about before, we've just discussed the structures, but we also said the interactions between each of the different parts. And this is where having policies in advance becomes very useful. And this means that any potential conflicts can be reduced in the future. And we are also increasing our levels of transparency and communication as well. The reality is that many family businesses operate through informal agreements and understandings, which are great, and they don't get me wrong, they work very, very well, but they work very well up until a point where they don't. Okay, so it can happen where this informal agreement, someone might not have fulfilled their side of the agreement, and the whole system breaks down. So for this, I would be of the tendency to advise you to start thinking about developing this family constitution or protocol if you haven't done so already. And the document will obviously include the core rules, the regulations. For example, you probably want to include the purpose of your company, so what you want to achieve, your values. You will want to include the rules of the game. How do we play the game and getting to our destination? How will we resolve the different discrepancies and disputes? And these are all important issues that need to be dealt with. But I would advise that these types of documents are normally not enforceable by law, but that doesn't matter, because as a consultant, I would advise that it's not the end document that would be my main focus. Instead, what my focus would be is the process of developing this protocol and this formalized document. So that's what we're really interested in. And what I mean by this is that internalizing a way of thinking and getting everybody to sing from the same sheet in case any unexpected events occur. Just like that image we seen in one of the first slides, we need to see the same picture. So everybody needs to be seeing that dancing couple. Okay, so we all need to be seeing the same vision of the future and working towards that. So let's consider some best practices to achieve a strong culture, a strong corporate culture and organizational culture. What I'd like to do is just, again, I've been talking for quite a bit of time, but I wanted to give you that framework, an idea of that useful framework. But just to open the floor, thinking about your own companies, do you think that your company has a clear idea about where it is going to, and do you think this idea helps with overcoming these unexpected shocks? So the unexpected external destabilizers, such as the death that we talked about in the case study, or maybe a competitor releases a new product that we weren't expecting, or customers are no longer interested in our products. Do you have a clear vision in your company about where you're going to? And do you think this helps with these unexpected shocks? So if anybody wants to contribute, feel free. The first question is just the basic question. Do you have at this moment in time, do you have a clear vision of where your company wants to go? And the second one is, how is this going to help you if any external destabilizer or event from the outside impacts on the company? Okay, so we're seeing a risk management plan. What types of things do you include in your risk management plan, specifically for your company? Okay, so it's important that we do think of these things. So if you haven't thought about them before, this idea of the risk management plan, it's another name that we can use to deal with these unexpected events. But it's important, if you haven't already began to think about that, then you should begin to do it. So for example, one of the companies I've been working with, they have before the crisis, they actually were proactive, and they began to accumulate some, let's say they started to save money just in case any of these events happened. So they were proactive and they planned for the future. And what that meant was that when the pandemic hit, they were able to maintain liquidity up to a certain point. Okay, so they put themselves in a better position by taking a moment to reflect on the situation before everything happened, and they began to save in a proactive way, which set them up in a better position for when the pandemic hit. So it's important that we think of all the eventualities that could happen, because they are very real in today's time. So take a moment to think about them, and then think of solutions and plan for them as well. And with this recent, I'm just reading the chat. Okay, so that's really what Ricardo's saying, is they had an alternative ready for every activity. And what that, I'm sure that entailed, or that meant that you had to do a lot of extra work, no? Okay, so by doing that, probably at the time it's more work, but in the end, over the longer term, it will pay off. So that's a good practice to do. So you've got the alternatives for each and every possible scenario. It's almost a way of scenario planning, which can help. So normally these things we don't tend to think about until something goes wrong. That's why we should start to think about them now, so that we prepare ourselves for that. And recent studies have shown, so there's been recent studies that show that proactively trying to come up with some formal plan, be it a succession plan, has a positive impact on the sustainability of family firms. And succession being such a big issue within family firms, if we plan for this, it can be thought of as really the professionalization and the formalization of rules and specific protocols that family businesses adopt at each stage of succession. So I would recommend that you begin to think about this as well, in terms of the succession process, to have this protocol in place. And traditionally, one of the biggest challenges facing our businesses has been professionalization, and the use of these protocols helps overcome some potential difficulties that can arise. And it's important to realize that change often requires us to make explicit our implicit ways of reasoning, thinking, and making decisions. And that can become quite uncomfortable for some people. So we know what we're thinking inside, but then trying to make it explicit and verbalize it or put it down in writing becomes much more difficult. But we have to push ourselves to do it. And when drafting any protocol, it is crucial to take into consideration not only the family members and their attitudes and their desires and their behaviors, but also the context, also the specific circumstances that each one is living, because each one of us, each individual has their own worlds. Okay, we're all living with our own worries and necessities, and we have to take them into consideration when we're drawing up different protocols. And these considerations provide the foundations that support an organizational culture of a family business. So we're taking into consideration the individual and their own personal circumstances. And that's where a mission and vision and values are extremely useful. I talked about before at the start when I was saying where I am currently located. So our mission, our values, and our reasons for being are very explicit. We can see them within the building. Okay, if it's not through people's actions and people doing things, so we have the motto, actions, not words. So people actually doing things. We also see them signposted on the walls. So we have them in writing that symbolizes the way we think, and they act as a constant reminder for us about why we exist. What are we trying to achieve? And what that does is it brings everybody together in this idea of we're all fighting for the same cause. We're all happy to be here. We can identify with the organization, we can identify with the business, and it becomes more than work. Okay, it becomes a lifestyle. So we have to find a mission that matches our value, and also it matches our way of doing things as well. So we need to develop this strong organizational culture, and there are lots of different goals that you might want to achieve from your company. So it's necessary for you to contemplate what these are. For example, you might want to grow as much as you possibly can. You might be looking for high growth, or you might be looking for liquidity. You might be looking for some cash that you want to use outside the business. So you just want to make as much cash as possible. Or even still, you might want to maintain as much control over the ownership as you possibly can. Okay, so there's a number of different reasons why people have a family business or a business in general, but you need to find out what this reason is for you. What is this purpose for you? And some people are quite happy to work with close family members who know how to annoy them and get under their skin. We have all experienced the fact that for some reason it is our closest family, our brothers and our sisters, that really know how to push our buttons the most. But when it comes to the formalities of dealing with people from the outside who perhaps impose more accountability, that annoying brother or that annoying sister becomes much more appealing. Okay, so we have to know what we want. What is our purpose? Do we want this accountability? Do we want to grow? Do we want to make profit, as much profit as possible? Sorry. Okay, but you need to get into that reason. But the great thing for you is that you have the freedom to decide what you want to do. And this means that if a decision or an action is out of sync with your own beliefs, then you can choose not to do it or not to make it. And that's the great thing about having a family business. However, making sure that your business is able to produce the tangible outcomes that are in line with the values that you hold doesn't happen by accident. Many owners are quite unclear about what they want, or maybe they don't know how to communicate it effectively. And what you need to do is define your own rules of the game, and making sure that everybody knows how uh, to play it. So you need to take this time. So you might think it's silly. Why do I have to think about this? This is all very straightforward. It's common sense. But the large amount of people that I work with don't take the time to sit back and reflect on what actually is their purpose as a company. What do they want to achieve? What values do they have? And to do it, to create your mission and values, you follow these different steps. Here's a useful stage model of how to do it. So the first thing is to do is here you're really asked to think about why do you choose to own a business together with your family. So what is the reason that you own a business with other family members? And try to go beyond this superficial answer of I want to maintain a legacy, or we have more financial resources if we pull the assets together. These answers for a lot of people may be intuitively compelling, intuitively attractive, but are they the real reason that you're doing it, or is it just the surface reason? If these reasons drive your mission or your values, then it will be very difficult to create something that lasts over the longer term. I'm not saying that it's not impossible, but it will make your life a lot more difficult. Better answers will emerge from discussing with other owners or other family members to get a real shared reason. And remember, what you're looking for is to create this unity and cohesiveness through developing a sense of pride in the company. Think in terms of aspirations. Make it as inclusive for all members and as attractive as possible for not just the people today, but also future generations as well. So the first thing is to develop this shared dream. Write down what your dream is for the family in the future and get everybody to do it. Next thing is to put it into writing. Put it down into writing and then think about the different roles that each family member has or they need to achieve it. Next is the reasons why. In step 3, think about the reasons why you would sell the business or stop being a family business together, and see if they align with your values. And finally, it's important to formally state these values as well. Okay, so this is just one option that you can use. I'm going to stop the presentation now because I noticed that some people are asking about the length of the presentation. So I want to give you time to ask a few questions. I want to debate. I want to discuss various issues. I want to learn some stuff from you, and let's try and get a little bit of debate going for the last part of the presentation. Okay, so any questions, please feel free to ask, speak through the microphone so that we can engage in more discussions. But now I just closing the presentation there. So on the steps to develop the culture, I want you to ask any questions that you have, any issues, any interesting pieces of information that you maybe want to share.
Yes, exactly. So, well, thank you very much, Dr. Donaldson, for your insightful intervention. I'm sure your contribution has helped a lot to family businesses in order to settle the foundations in terms of values, culture, governance mechanisms, and legacy. So, well, now it's time to give the word to our participants, who I'm sure have also a lot to say and to add to this fruitful discussion that, at least as I have seen, has already started through the chatbot. So yeah, from this moment on, we open up a questions and answer session in which we are happy to welcome any doubt, question, suggestion, contribution from the side of the audience.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Colin, we have a business run by 3 siblings, okay? Now, we have done succession planning and also we're drafting the family charter. And they have 2 different departments, but I'm stuck over as to who. Is it important that the family charter will drive us to who out of 3 will be ultimately the final decision maker in this process?
Okay, so the way so you have three siblings, and in terms of making the decision, what is the final decision? What issues are you thinking about making decision based on? If we talk about the framework that we mentioned before, are you relating to the owner's room where you make the decisions on the major issues, or exactly what decisions are being discussed and contemplated?
Usually, the board decides on very major issues like financial issues, like investments, you see. But
Mhm.
when it comes to departmental problems, these are the conflicts that arise from time to time. At the moment, maybe resolved by segregating the departments, you see. But eventually, when we're not here anymore as parents, you see, we would like to ask you, which is essential that the family charter will decide as to who of the three has to be finally the overall leader of the business. Is it essential that it is included in the draft in the draft charter?
I think it's good to have a plan about exactly who it's going to be, because it's going to give clarity to whoever in the end is going to have this final decision, because obviously you need to give up resources, you need to give up time to train in terms of who's going to be taking on the reins and who's going to be taking over. But it's difficult to put that in place. So, for example, in the case study, the company, the Spanish company, knew within 5 to 6 years of who was going. They had made the decision of who was going to take over the company. Okay, so in terms of that timeline, degree of planning, they were preparing. They had the succession plan over five to 6 years. So if it's not written, you certainly need to have an idea of who it's going to be, because obviously you have to make sure that they're adequately prepared in terms of maybe it's not feasible to employ lots of different resources to develop the three. I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly, or if that answered your question. But in turn, I took it as that you're looking to decide eventually who will take over and who will have the decision-making power
Yeah,
in
that's
the end.
yeah. It's important that we have to conclude, because this is where I got stuck, you see, in this charter. So you're saying that it's essential that we have to put pen to paper as to who finally will be the final decision maker. Is what you're saying, right?
I would recommend that you have it clear and they also have it clear. Whether you want to put it in writing or not, that it's completely your decision. But certainly in terms of the family relationships, in terms of the resources that you're going to employ, I would definitely recommend that you have it clear and they know who it's going to be. So I would make the decision whether you want to put it in writing or not. That it's a personal decision for you to make.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Colin. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so if it's going to be one person, they're going to have there's going to be less conflict in terms of making the decision, because in the end someone has to make the calls and the decisions. But one person, in terms of the owners, it probably will give a clear direction. Okay, so in terms of if there's a stalemate or if there's any decisions that have to be taken, it's always good to eventually decide who will have the final say, because it can't go on. Discussions can't go on forever, especially in this dynamic and ever-changing world. So there has to be some way to break the stalemate, and that may be in terms of maybe you can allocate decision-making power in terms of areas of expertise as well. So if there's an issue related to finance, for example, maybe you give the final say to one person over another person because of their area of expertise. But normally we see the CEO who has that the overriding power, but it certainly has been done in terms of expertise in different areas.
Thank you. That's also a good idea. Thanks, Colin. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other issues, any other comments they would like to make? For me personally, I would like to, in your businesses, I would like to find out how you coped with the current context and the current circumstances. Obviously, the large amounts of uncertainty with the pandemic and COVID. I would, if anybody wants to share their experience, I would really like to listen to it and compare it to what I've been experiencing myself.
I think, Colin, what you mentioned properly, that we don't have time or think about the eventualities. You see, we move on, and then we don't realize about the risks. I think we should, from today onward, I think we should sit down, sit back, and look at all eventualities, and also come up with an action plan as to how to try and resolve them. You see, because this has been a very difficult period for everybody. You see, in the whole world. Well, I think the world is at its knees now, on its knees, whether it's aviation, whether it's tourism, whether it's, manufacturing. So I think it's time that we don't just sit back on what we've been doing for the last, well, maybe about 30 years in our business now, or 40, and look at eventualities about the risks that you've mentioned that could come up when we are not prepared for it. I mean, the world has been caught unprepared. I don't know what we say scientists around the world, but they didn't have any clue what's coming up. So probably we have to make sure that we don't fall behind in case these eventualities come up, because I'm also seeing some gray areas coming up, especially with Brexit in our case, where we also depend on the British market in some of our imports, and is also giving us concern. So we may have to look at different alternatives, you see. But I think it's time to, as you said, very clearly sit back and think, and with the team, you see, with the different siblings who run different departments, as to maybe list what eventualities could come up, and also how we could face these problems rather than being, retroactive. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. It's not easy to do. From my experience, it's not easy to get people to sit down and take the time to think about these things, because everybody is always very busy. They have a lot of things to do, and when we're living in the moment, these things tend to override and take precedent over everything else. But it's shocks and external shocks like this that force us to step back and take a breath and try and think about, okay, what can we do in the future to prevent these types of things? And here's where it becomes useful to engage in different trends analysis. So we look at the trends that are happening over 5 years within the world. You can look at globalization. Where is it going now? Obviously, it's decelerating. Maybe we're going into a period of de-globalization as well. But we should be very aware of all the different trends that are occurring. So, for example, the president-elect Joe Biden, he's coming in and he's going to have a real focus on sustainability. So, for us as family businesses, we need to think and take this longer-term approach in terms of building sustainable companies as well. So we have to be smart in the way that we navigate what's going on, but that entails constantly searching and looking at the trends around us, and really not being stuck in the past, but trying to look towards the future as best as we can, and try and be prepared for that.
Just a small an idea we started this January, Colin, is that we from a family business program run in Malta by the also family business sector, and we've started an investment fund for the 7 siblings we have,
Mm.
so that we starting every month to put money in it, so that when they are qualified, when they grow up, because some of them are university, some of them are young, between 13 and 22 years,
Yeah.
they can draw upon these funds, for training, for investment or training for their own career, not necessarily in our business, you see, which is the beauty business and education, school, but maybe it will be when today you don't have the money, but tomorrow we'll have the funds which they can draw upon from the profits, that they can enhance their knowledge, widen their knowledge, and maybe study abroad, or take other qualifications. But this is an idea that came across thanks to the local program here in Malta
Yeah.
on family businesses, which I picked up honestly from a bakery,
Okay.
which is incredible how they've changed the whole thing from their about 100-year-old generation, you see, and the children started this idea, which I've picked up, and just as you said, not just my motto has been for many years with my hotel experience, action, not words, you see. So I just started the ball rolling, and from January this fund started kicking, you see. So every month so much money is being invested into each sibling's investment fund, so that they can draw on it for their future development. Hopefully, some of them will come to business. 2 are in university, but they're following different paths, you see. But you never know what will happen in the future, you see. Thank you.
Exactly, and it's about taking that risk as well. So that's risky to do. Okay, to put this money aside when maybe people are thinking that it can be used for other things. So it's about taking a risk and being willing to do that. Okay, so it's about being brave as well to go against other people that may not have the same perception as you, but it's just about believing in yourself and your own family values, about how you want to progress, and sticking by them as well. And looking at the questions, I'm seeing in terms of performance, correlate performance and payments in family business. It depends on your strategy, really. Okay, so that's a decision that maybe you want the owners to take it. Probably the board will take that decision for you, but that's very much context dependent in terms of how you provide different payments in terms of performance, or maybe it's just a set percentage if a global company margin is met. But again, it's really impossible to say what is the most important thing to do. It's just all dependent upon your own numbers and the different jobs and the roles and the different activities that the people are doing. Okay, so that's really a business specific question. So to be able to answer it, I probably would need to have a more in-depth view of the business. Just considering the questions at the very start. So when we looked at the different types of values, being honest, and if you're assessing your own companies, how would you describe these questions within your own company? So do you have this clear vision? Is everybody committed to it? Is everybody committed to this view? And probably for me, how is your culture? What is the culture of your business? How would someone describe the culture of your business if they were talking to me about it? Okay, so do you think the flexibility, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? So you don't have a structured mission and future-oriented business culture. Do you think that's good or bad? Or a mixture? What are the dangers? What are the dangerous things? What are the negative things about having no plans or so much flexibility? Does anybody else want to contribute their values? What personal values do you all hold, and are these in line with your business? Okay, so probably with this, Effie, I would advise to begin to think about these planning issues of succession. Okay, so just having something in mind. I know that you're saying it's very very early, but I would recommend that you get something or begin to look at it. What is the process? What do we need to include? How are we going to do it? So it's something that it's probably better to think about now rather than leave it too late. Joe mentioned that before about thinking towards the future. Okay, so there's that planning towards the future. The values on the family comes in terms of providing for the family. So from that those two or three sentences, I would see that there's very the emphasis on the family is probably more important than the business, which you're trying to care. We see the caring values, and it's coming across quite clearly through your actions and what you're doing. Okay, and I retail store, the eco-friendly cosmetics. Okay, so it's something really worthwhile doing, I think, in terms of recycling, sustainability, and contributing to the environment. So that certainly has a vision into the futures, and it's easier when you believe in these things, when you believe in sustainability, and when you believe about caring for the environment for future generations. It's easier for you to you know this happen. So that's really interesting. Okay, so I like that one. So Danica, looking at your comment and your contribution, this is something that I've seen a lot. It's something that I've witnessed quite a lot in terms of the pandemic and how it's affecting the different companies. And what I would say is probably that family business is obviously, for me, better prepared for such crises, because I think that they are resilient. And I don't really like to use the word resilient a lot, because I know it's become quite a buzzword in today's times. But I truly believe that family businesses are resilient, and they have to be resilient. In some cases, there's you could argue that there's less complexity if they're not overly big. If they're small family business, there's less complexity, which means that they can move faster, especially in these circumstances. And this pandemic really gave the opportunity to make some radical changes in terms of family business structure. And we I think we really played to our strengths, and the strengths that we have were the solidarity between each other, and also this ability. We're always looking into the future, so we're always planning ahead. So I think that was very useful for us. But one of the things that was quite unintended was this cultural change. And looking at your comment, this matches my experience exactly. So there was a cultural change in that there was an increased sense of connectedness. So you said your employees tended to become part of the family business and the structure. So you wanted to help them keep their jobs, retain their jobs, and created a more hardworking environment. And it's funny how similar it is to what I have seen. And what I've seen is what has happened is that there's been a lot more empowerment. A lot of the employees are becoming a lot more empowered by what they are seeing from the family. So the communication, as I mentioned at the very start, is an important process. And communication has risen and increased quite a lot. Owners are talking with directors are talking with managers with normal employees. Everyone's talking to each other, and there's a flow of communication. And what that does is it really develops this sense of belonging and desire to try and help the company to do well. So I think that what you're saying there is exactly the values that we needed to work through this. And these efficiency processes as well, but there's also the digitalization as well, digitalization processes that a lot of businesses have had to adopt their business models, that maybe in traditional sectors and family businesses that are really built on a strong tradition, they have had to change, they've had to adapt. And what I'm seeing is those that are adapting. So for example, I'm talking about a local bakery again. So we mentioned the bakery before, but a local bakery, it's a lot of people, and they weren't accustomed to digitalization. They didn't even have a card reader to pay by card, and they've had to, this for them, this was a drastic change, and they made it. But what they were seeing now is they're seeing an increase in their revenues. Okay, so these changes, although they are forced, and although they might go against the traditional mold, let's say, they do have benefits. And it's about trying to open our minds towards these benefits, and just really taking that risk and trying them. And I probably would add to that, we need a bit of luck. Obviously, a lot of the economic circumstances have meant that people have had to take very serious decisions. And at the end of the day, we do need a bit of luck to get that break and to keep going. But for us in family business, I think to get that luck, we need to be prepared. Okay, if you are prepared, the chances are that you will find it. And if you have this resilience to keep going, I think eventually we'll be able to find that small bit of luck that we need to come out of this.
Well, perfect. So if there are no further questions, we will leave the session here. So is there any further questions, suggestions, or comments that anyone wants to do? Just as a finishing for today's webinar. If not, we'll leave it here. Okay, great. Well, so first of all, I would like to thank our guest speaker today, Dr. Colin Donaldson. I think we have learned a lot today with your insightful presentation, and of course, we are getting right now lots of ideas to implement in the businesses. And yeah, so a big thanks for our guest speaker. And once again, I would like to thank all our audience today for being so active. Your contributions and comments have helped a lot to bring a really fruitful discussion today. So yeah, really thank you very much for your suggestions and for your comments, because it made the webinar today. Great. After finishing, I will appreciate if you could just respond to the online questionnaire that Celia has already sent. Just a little bit up in the chat. Anyway, I will copy the link just to appear the first. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Celia. So we highly appreciate if you could just spend a couple of minutes answering this online questionnaire in order us to help for improving more and more for next webinars. So next Tuesday at the same hour, we have a meeting. That case will be with Dr. Rana Yabaki. She's the head of EdHEC Family Business Research Center, and she will be talking about the intergenerational dynamics. Don't lose the opportunity to listen to her, because of course she will give a lot of insights about this intergenerational dynamics. Well, so that will be all for today. Again, thank you very much for your for being so active and for your attendance. I hope you have enjoyed it. And yeah, thank you. Have a nice evening.